Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm going to jump right into this, family. I'm going to jump right into this. Some of you are already aware of this, but this needs to be brought out because Christians, they paint this picture of themselves as though they are so righteous and so holy and so perfect and so loving. But in their textbooks, many of them actually teach that black people came over here as immigrants and not slaves. And when you listen to some of the rhetoric in which they believe or claim that rhetoric comes from us as it relates to the truth about history, when you listen to the rhetoric that they put out there and they call it education, it's mind-blowing. Now, in the public school, it's not as bad. When they made a comparison of the private schools and Christian schools and things of that nature, they say the public school, they fluff things up and hide things as well. So that's not good at all. But they are not as bad as many of your private and your Christian schools. They make it worse. As a matter of fact, some of their textbooks make it seem like it's so-called black people that are the reason and the cause for all of the racial tension in this country. They point every last bit of the blame at black people and black organizations and black talking points and black issues. All of that is to blame for all of the racial problems. They accept absolutely no blame in anything that goes wrong in race relationships here in this country. It's black people's fault that police are the way they are towards police. It's black people's fault that black and white don't get along. All of that. And this is being taught in school systems. This is being taught. And yet, America boasts of having some of the best education on the planet, which is a joke. Look at Stupid in America. It's a 2-part series. I don't know if they've extended the series or not, but there were 2 segments that I saw a long time ago, and they actually showed you what was really going on in the American public school system. Anyway, I'm going to let you listen to a lot of the details of what they believe is happening versus what reality is, and why they have been allowed to print lies and call it education. When I say print lies, they are literally printing and publishing lies and teaching it in school. How about that? Anyway, take a listen at this and I will be right back.
Guardian analysis finds that private schools, especially Christian schools, use textbooks that tell of a version of history that is racially biased and inaccurate. One history textbook exclusively refers to immigrants as aliens. Another blames the Black Lives Matter movement for strife between communities and police officers. A third discusses the prevalence of black supremacist organizations during the civil rights movement, calling Malcolm X the most prominent black supremacist of the era. Legislatures and boards of education around the U.S. are currently engaging in acrimonious battles about how issues of race and equity are taught in public K-12 classrooms, the latest culture war in a decades-long fight around whose stories and contributions get highlighted in school. But largely left out of this conversation has been the education provided in private schools, thousands of which have quietly been excluding diverse voices and teaching biased versions of history for years. While public school textbooks suffer from their own blind spots, a Guardian analysis has found that private schools, especially Christian schools, use textbooks that tell a version of history that is racially biased and often inaccurate. These textbooks, used in thousands of private schools, many of which receive tens of thousands of dollars in public funding every year, whitewash the legacy of slavery, frame Native Americans as lesser, and blame the Black Lives Matter movement for sowing racial discord. This Guardian analysis comes as backlash around anti-racist education in public schools has reached a fever pitch. About half of states have enacted or are looking to enact restrictions on discussions of systemic racism. In Florida, for example, the State Board of Education recently voted to ban the teaching of critical race theory and the 1619 Project, a curriculum born out of a New York Times Magazine initiative that seeks to reframe American history through the historical legacy of slavery. In Iowa, the governor has signed a bill broadly banning the discussion of divisive concepts in public school, including racism and sexism. The term critical race theory, an academic discipline that examines the ways in which racism operates in U.S. laws and society, has also become a catch-all bogeyman term for wokeness run amok, even though experts say they believe the theory is actually used in relatively few classrooms around the country. Conservative critics say that in practice, the theory is designed to make white students feel guilty for the sins of others, a drastic distortion of the academic concept. Often hidden from public view, though, is how private schools teach these issues. Private schools, unlike public ones, receive little oversight or restrictions when it comes to curriculum. In truth, thousands of private schools are currently teaching history through a racially biased lens. These textbooks actually support what critical race theory is trying to argue, that is, racism is part of the fabric of American life, said Dorinda Carter, chairperson for the Department of Teacher Education at Michigan State University and professor of race, culture and equity. Those textbooks actually further spread racist ideas, that one group is superior over another, one group is more human than another. The Guardian reviewed dozens of textbooks produced by the Christian textbook publishers Abeka, Bob Jones University Press, and Accelerated Christian Education, three of the most popular textbook sources used in private schools throughout the U.S. These textbooks describe slavery as black immigration, and say Nelson Mandela helped move South Africa to a system of radical affirmative action. It's unclear how many students are exposed to this type of curriculum in school, though the Abeka website boasts that its books have reached more than 1 million Christian school students in 2017. The Accelerated Christian Education website claims its materials are used in tens of thousands of schools and innumerable homeschools established in over 140 countries. One Accelerated Christian Education high school textbook refers to the Civil War as the war between the states, a term ordinarily used by those who romanticize the Confederacy, and says that the end of slavery in this country was a legitimate goal, but much was done in the name of abolition that was as evil as the institution of slavery itself. It contains a section titled Black Immigration, referring to slavery, which notes, "Not all immigrants have come to America willingly." Another textbook, after debating the cause of the war between the states, authors describe the positive legacy of the Civil War. In the ravages of lives and families being torn apart, believers found, in the North and South alike, new strength in God. The South suffered greatly both from the war and the period of Reconstruction that followed, but DeLand O.B. Cotton rose from the ashes to become the Bible Belt, a part of the country that has continued to stand firm on the fundamentals of Christian faith. A 2017 investigation previously conducted by HuffPost found that at least one-third of all private voucher schools throughout the country use curricula from one of these three sources: Abeka, Bob Jones University Press, or Accelerated Christian Education, amounting to about 2,400 schools. The investigation did not account for the many private schools around the country that use these textbooks without voucher programs. Instead of focusing on the horrors of slavery, the Accelerated Christian Education book sympathizes with the Southern landowners who had to learn a new way of life after the war. Under radical Reconstruction, the South suffered. Great Southern leaders and much of the old aristocracy were unable to vote or hold office. The result was that state legislatures were filled with illiterate or incompetent men. Northerners who were eager to make money or gain power during the crisis rushed to the South. For all these reasons, Reconstruction led to graft and corruption and reckless spending. In retaliation, many Southerners formed secret organizations to protect themselves and their society from anarchy. Among these groups was the Ku Klux Klan, a clandestine group of white men who went forth at night dressed in white sheets and pointed white hoods. Ed Countryman, distinguished history professor at Southern Methodist University, says the textbook appears to identify more with the citizens who were fighting to preserve slavery than the victims of an inhumane system. The South had waged a huge struggle to preserve an essentially evil system, and the rest of the world knew it, said Countryman. When it's over, yeah, the South was devastated, so was Nazi Germany after 1945. A representative from Accelerated Christian Education did not respond to a request for comment. The other two textbook publishers, Abeka and Bob Jones University, take more pains to describe the horrors of slavery, but their history books still avoid reckoning with the impact of race and racism. A Bob Jones World History textbook paints the religion of Islam as violent, with one section titled Islam and Murder. An Abeka 11th grade history textbook passage describes slavery in purely economic terms, ignoring its human costs, writing that slaves seem to be better investments than indentured servants. As the Abeka textbook moves to modern history, the authors criticize President Barack Obama for harming race relations in the country. Unfortunately, Americans' views of race relations declined after Obama came into office. Race riots in places such as Ferguson, Missouri, and Baltimore, Maryland, greatly escalated racial tensions and worsened strife between minorities and local police, the textbook reads. President Obama's attempts to resolve these problems often seem to make the situation worse. Yet another Abeka High School history book echoes that analysis, blaming the Black Lives Matter movement for strife with law enforcement. Groups such as Black Lives Matter, BLM, sharpened the divide between police and citizen, and black and white, with divisive rhetoric, says the textbook. These textbooks also treat same-sex relationships as a matter of biblical immorality. Under a section called Cultural Decay, an Abeka history textbook says that increased acceptance of homosexuality has been a result of declining American family values, noting that such acceptance increased during the Obama administration. Public schools also take different approaches to teaching these issues, based on location and state curriculum standards. A New York Times analysis of public school textbooks found that there are subtle differences in how textbooks used in places like Texas teach issues of race and gender compared with California. Public school textbooks overall take a far more multicultural, fact-based, and objective approach to teaching history than the Christian textbooks. A representative for Bob Jones University Press did not respond to a request for comment, and a representative from Abeka declined to comment. These textbooks teach history from an evangelical perspective and have been around for decades, working to stoke fears about secular society, and more specifically, what goes on in public schools, says Adam Lotz, a professor at Binghamton University who studies the history of American education has researched these publishers. Those who are fighting for bans of critical race theory in schools are in some ways building on that legacy. The heart and soul of the anti-CRT outburst is this anxiety of the changing protagonists in the story of American history, said Lotz. I think that's what captures part of what these textbook manufacturers have been doing forever with American history.
Okay, as you've heard, all of this stuff is very intentional. You have companies and organizations and school systems who literally know what they're doing. They are changing history and they are printing lies and calling it education. But yet these same institutions want to grade you and determine whether or not you're educated based on this information they've put together. So they can print lies, and if you fail the test when they are grading you, then you fail based on the information they've put together. This is why this education system is a joke. Now, I know that there are some very real things to be learned out here. Reading, writing, arithmetic, okay. But history is one of those things that these people need to just leave alone, because they're not right in how they determine what history is. They have whited out much of history. Look at how the Bible, which, most of it takes place in Africa, in regions of Africa where dark, indigenous, nappy-head folks used to live. But when they make their movies and they print their books, everyone in the Bible is white, except for a couple of people here and there, most of which are servants or slaves. Okay, so again, we are dealing with people who are not honest, especially these Christian evangelicals. They are not honest as it relates to how they teach history. They say that everyone is trying to paint them in a bad light when your history is what it is. Black people were not immigrants. They were slaves, and they were treated horribly. Not just wrongly, but horribly. Of course, we know all of this stuff was prophesied. We know all of it was prophesied. But for them to try to paint a whole different picture and present something that is not true to history, it shows you that there is no moral value in how they teach. There is no value in it, period. Anytime where you paint your victims out to be the ones who are the guilty parties, black people, they're saying that black people are the reason or the cause for all of the racial divide, all of the racial problems, all of the racial tension. They don't even want you talking about the history of the KKK, and in which some of those organizations are responsible for some of this teaching that's going out there. Now, everyone knows, and it's not even fully documented, the number of people who the KKK have killed, black people, right? And anyone who tried to defend black people. Yet and still, they have their hands in educating the public and thinking that people are supposed to fail based on not adhering to what they teach. The hypocrisy in all of this is ridiculous. And anyone who can sit here and defend this in the least, you are not right. You are not fair. When you know what the history of this country represents, and yet you don't see anything wrong with these people printing books that have bald-faced, bold-faced lies, saying that blacks were immigrants and not slaves, not wanting to even talk about the heinousness of the torture and the treatment of so-called black people, and now try to make it illegal. You want to make it illegal to talk about the truth of what happened. You don't want the truth out there. And so that's very, when you call yourselves Christians, I believe you, because I know the history of Christianity. Because I know the history of it, I don't see it as a righteous organization with good-hearted, loving, kind, righteous, God-fearing, God-living for fair people. I don't see it as that. I see it for what it truly is. It was founded on lies, founded on hypocrisy, founded on pride, founded on everything that goes against the Most High God of heaven, as you call him. But anyway, it doesn't matter how much they cover up, how much they try to hide, how much they try to gloss over and make it seem like, oh, the black people are all to blame, but white people are so innocent and being blamed for things in history that should be buried and not talked about anymore. And the way that you treat black folk now has nothing to do with how you've historically treated them for the past few hundred years, but the way you treat them now is all new, and it has nothing or no type of attachment to the past. Okay. There's much that can be said about this whole thing. It feels like we're just going around in circles with this whole topic. When you're dealing with an unrepentant mind, it's like a waste of time. It will take the Most High God of heaven, as the world calls him, to deal with this type of pride and hypocrisy. The lies will continue to be taught. People will continue to believe it, but the truth will always be. That being said, I am finished, and until next time. We hope you liked today's topic. Please leave your comments below. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, share it like this video, and with that, we're out. Be sure to ring the bell to be notified of new uploads on this channel, and also comment, share, like, and subscribe.